Okay, well, hello, West Pasadena, and thank you for joining our District 6 Town Hall. Super excited to be here and to have a great discussion with some of our city's leaders, both inside city government and out. And I want to start by obviously, again, welcoming all of you and thanking you for joining us. Now, I do have to sort of flash that I was in a public health director's briefing a few weeks ago, and she was talking about COVID-19. And I realized it stands for COVID 2019. And here we are with 2022 right around the corner. And we're still grappling with the pandemic. And who would have thought? But we're still standing. You know, we may be bloodied a bit, but unbowed. And I'll come back to that when I summarize sort of some of the update on the district and the city and what we're all working on at City Hall. But I want right at the top to recognize and give a moment or two to two extremely important of our officials in Pasadena. They're both, I count as good friends, and regrettably, they're both going to be moving on here soon. And I'm talking, of course, about our great police chief, John Perez, and our great city manager, Steve Mermel. And, you know, I've been with the council for many years, as all of you know, and both Steve and John were with the city when I joined the council. I remember working with Steve, and I think he was in the finance department and in various assignments along the way. I remember doing a ride along with John Perez when he was probably a patrol sergeant, I want to say. You know, that was, I think, right after I had done the Citizen Police Academy, which was 1996. So that's 25 years ago now, John, how time flies. But, you know, I'm deeply saddened to lose both Chief Perez and City Manager Mermel. They've both done an outstanding job for us day in, day out. You know, running an urban police department is a huge challenge, and John has met that challenge and more. And then being the CEO of a municipal services organization, the kind of the Pasadena is, you know, with, gosh, almost $1 billion total budget and 2,000 city employees and all of the big initiatives that we're doing. Again, deeply grateful. And, you know, none of us is bigger than the institution. So, you know, at some point we all have to go pursue our own plans or what's in the best interests of ourselves and our family. So we certainly understand, but we're going to miss you both a lot. And I want to give you each an opportunity to say a word or two. And then I know Steve Mermel will come back onto the panel when we do the Q&A in a little bit. But Chief, you want to go first? You look like you're in an outdoors spot there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. I am at our LA County strategic workshop. This week we engaged DA Gascon on many issues that impact all of us. So that's where I've been the last few days. And we'll go into tomorrow again and see what we could bring back for the residents of Pasadena. So I appreciate, Councilmember, you've been a great supporter. You've held us accountable. You've give us great advice, direction. I'm fortunate to have worked with you and on so many things. So I thank you guys and I thank the community so much. It's a hard decision to leave. This is something you could do the rest of your life and not really think twice about it. But a point comes, I think, when you have to give the organization a chance to take what we've done. This is likely to be our lowest Part 1 violent crime year in many, many decades. If you were at the Chief's breakfast a couple of weeks ago, we are a few hundred crimes away from being one of the top 10 safest cities in California. So I know we could do it. Our use of force has dropped by 35%. We have almost an agency a week visiting us around the state, asking what we're doing different. But we still have challenges. It's a never-ending journey to get this stuff done and put it into play. And I'd like to see the organization kind of take it forward in a new direction and try many different things. So I have Commander Shute with us tonight, and I think you'll enjoy his presentation, the information he offers. He is a leader in the San Gabriel Valley. He is somebody that could take this organization to the next level as well. So we're fortunate to have him with us and not leaving us to another department as a chief So he's going to be here with us for a while. So thank you again, council member. Thank you to everybody. And I'll say one thing to end it with is I am fortunate to work with what I think is the best city manager in the state. Steve and I have a unique relationship I think most chiefs and city managers are a little bit jealous of. Not in the terms that we're friends, that we don't socialize, we don't play golf, we don't have lunch, we don't do dinner. We just come to work and we share and we get the work done. And he's guided me and provided all the leadership I need to do the things that should be done for the community. So I appreciate it. And thank you again.
Thank you, John. And yes, we know Art Shute very well, and we're really gratified that he's a commander now. Again, talk about, someone I've known a long, long time, and we're very grateful and respectful of his substantial abilities. So thank you. And I'm glad Art will stick around and be here for our meeting. So thank you. And Steve Mermel.
Well, thank you. I'm retiring because the chief won't go to dinner with me, won't play golf with me, won't socialize with me. That's the real reason. But, the truth is, first of all, let me again also thank you, Steve. Your support has always been steadfast. You're always looking out for the best interests of the city. It's been great working with you in my capacity as city manager and all the years prior. You're really looking out for Pasadena, and I really appreciate that. And everyone should know that. Like John, I've had a long career, almost 33 years in the city and a couple of other years in other cities before that. And so you just get to a point where you say, well, okay, I want to go off and maybe do something different. I'm very proud of the challenges that we've overcome in the years. You mentioned the COVID-19. Most cities don't have the complication that Pasadena has because most cities don't have their own health department. And that really created a whole lot more complications for us. It was a great thing to have our own health department, and Dr. Go is fabulous. But I think as everyone realizes, it just simply made the last year and a half very, very complex, very complicated. I think we did a fabulous job. I think we did a better job than the county of LA, quite frankly. I look how we were able to keep our restaurants open, whenever that was, last Thanksgiving or the one before that, it's all a blur. But it's because we have the resources and the capacity to manage through it. We were also, first city in Southern California with the vaccine mandate for our employees. And all along, Steve, you were the one pushing for that. So I appreciate that encouragement. And when I read the LA Times, and I see that the city of Los Angeles is at a much lower rate than we are in terms of their vaccination rates, I think it's indicative of the workforce in Pasadena and the job that we've done. I'm proud of everything we've done. It's just time in my life to take it down a little bit. City manager job is 24/7, as is police chief and also city council member. So I thank you all.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I certainly agree with your assessment, and maybe turning back now to some of the issues that we're working on and sharing with the constituents here in this town hall, that COVID continues to be a big part of our focus at City Hall. And I think we're over 90% now for vaccinations of the community at large who are eligible. I know we're rolling out, in fact, I think today or tomorrow, there'll be more announcements from Dr. Go about the availability of the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson boosters. The Pfizer boosters have already been available. And I think certainly from my conversations and as I move around our district is, really expressing its solidarity with you, Steve, and the public health director for mandating vaccines. We're being really smart about it. We want to be vaccinated. We want to eradicate this pandemic and get back to, this wonderful quality of life that we can enjoy here in town. So that's certainly a big part of it. And, it was more complex with the public health department, but also what a great asset for the city to be able to have that local expertise and guidance and the ability to do within some limits, obviously, but our own health directives and the like. So, tonight's meeting is dedicated principally to land use and zoning and some of the the big tectonic shifts that seem to be, moving the ground under our very feet. But before I turn to that, I'll mention just a couple of other things that we're working on. Obviously, the Rose Bowl is back in business, as many of the constituents who live in the neighborhoods above the bowl are aware. UCLA has been playing its games there, and so far so good. UCLA's got a very good football team this year, and so that's going well. And we're really looking forward to having the New Year's Day back in Pasadena after what will amount to a 2-year hiatus because of COVID. So we're super looking forward to, it'll probably be just in a couple of weeks, Steve, we'll have the bleachers will start to go up at Orange Grove in Colorado. And that's always an exciting time of year for West Pasadena. And then on January 1, we'll have the parade and the game as well. I personally thought LeVar Burton was a great choice by the tournament for the Grand Marshal. And so there's a lot to be really excited about, as we look forward to those events coming back in person. And then hopefully, if we can continue to beat back COVID and increase the vaccinations, we will be able to resume more fully meeting in person and being in one another's company. I do a lot of Zoom meetings, and they're great technology, but not quite a complete substitute for being in the same room and feeling one another's energy and facial expressions and all that. So I chair the council's legislative policy committee, and we are super grateful again here for the resources that we've been able to receive so far and that we expect to receive going forward from the federal government as part of the Rescue Act. I think a total of $52 million for Pasadena. We're also looking forward to, if it can finally sort of take flight, the infrastructure plan that will be coming from Washington, and looking forward to also some positive funding from Sacramento as well, in terms of getting back on our feet as a community from COVID and as an economy from COVID, and also, moving forward and addressing things like climate change and failing infrastructure and the like. So those are certainly some of the things. I know that I'm excited about the new Police Oversight Commission that's going to start meeting, I think, next week. And we hired an independent police auditor in response to a lot of the national, sort of move and some in Pasadena feeling that we strongly needed that. I think we have a great police department, and I'm proud of the work that they do and want to support them. And I've been on the Public Safety Committee my entire time on City Council. So I see this Police Oversight Commission and the Independent Police Auditor as an opportunity really to improve our best practices and ensure that we're always the most forward-looking and community-based policing agency that we can be. And I think the chief's remarks were spot on that, crime is down, and we're doing well in that regard. I think many of you know that every day or two, those of us on the council get a report of what's called noteworthy police activity. And I certainly know that sometimes the use of force cases or the shootings, which are always regrettable all the way around, when officers need to deploy that kind of force. But what would amaze you if you knew about the day in, day out activity of our officers is how many guns, for example, we seize where there is no use of force, where there's just a really flawless execution, and somehow fully loaded weapons are seized, and the holders of those are taken into custody or otherwise, detained. And so our officers do a great job, and I'm going to continue to have their back as well, even as we move forward and look at, ways that we can improve and be the best department for the entire community that we can be. We are in the midst of a redistricting effort, as most of you know. Some of you have been very involved in the redistricting task force's work and some of the outreach and community meetings. We did one in District 6 that the city clerk did a great job hosting, and our consultants participated. And with the new census now, we will be adjusting our council district boundaries. We are, as you all know, a city of districts. So the one person, one vote legal principle means that we should have districts that are of almost exactly the same population, at least each time the census is redone. And I'm proud, I think, to tell you that our district is like 2,500 residents above where we should be in terms of we've attracted a lot of new residents to West Pasadena and my district. Now, I, of course, attribute that to good representation at City Hall. People want to live in District 6. Some of my waggish friends have said, well, it's more about the multifamily housing that's gone up in parts of the district and all. And hopefully there's some truth in both of those things, but there will be some adjustment to District 6's boundaries. And there are several plans that are being discussed at the redistricting commission. We have two longtime friends and colleagues that are on the commission, Jeff Baum and Vince Farhat from West Pasadena are on the redistricting commission, and those will be coming forward to us here soon. So that's another important piece of business that we're working on. So we do send out notices about all of these topics and more in our email blasts to you and our newsletters that we circulate electronically. So if we don't have your email information, be sure to let us have that, and you'll be included on that, on those mailing lists. Okay, well then let's turn to the topic of the evening. And I want to introduce first David Reyes, who's our planning and community development director, and he's a great city official and city leader. I have no doubt, just to go off message here a little bit, that David Reyes would be a tremendous city manager if that's what he decided he wanted to do. But of course, you've got your hands full right now, David, with all the things that we're asking of you in the planning department. So I know that, let me ask you to maybe take 4 or 5 minutes and describe to us how you survey the landscape for, zoning and housing, and local control is something that our residents, our constituents are talking a lot about. These seemingly an endless stream of unfunded mandates from Sacramento that may be well-intentioned in terms of addressing things like affordability for housing and homelessness and the like, but maybe not as particularized for Pasadena as we would have them. And, it sort of begs the question of local control. Shouldn't the local officials be the ones to carry out the mission of ensuring a diverse community that has affordability and all the rest? So what's your take on all of this, David? And then we'll open up the panel and do some Q&A and have a discussion about it.
Thank you, Councilmember, and thank you for inviting me here and welcome to all of your residents. I think the issue of equity and inclusion across the state is a real one. We've talked about it at council time and again, the need to build affordable housing in the state of California. When it comes to local control, I think that for so many cities, local control means no development, no to affordable housing, no to building multifamily housing. And the opposite is true with the city of Pasadena. The council's policies going back 30 years with respect to planning are about inclusion and are about diversity and equity and looking to build affordable housing. Sure, we can always do better. And I think the council's pushing us in that direction to do better. But the issue of local control for Pasadena is one that's real because we spend so much time, energy, and resources on planning, on engaging the community. Everybody knows the Pasadena way, and I think it means something different to everybody. But what it really means for the planning department is ensuring that public participation is at the forefront of all of the planning activities that we take on. And because of the policies that the city council has enacted over the years with respect to inclusionary housing, with respect to the production of affordable housing, I dare say we have probably the best housing director in the state of California, if not the nation. What their department does with respect to producing affordable housing is second to none. For a city our size, 140,000 people, 1.4% LA County's population, we hit well above the waist. And I think that, I think that the challenge for us is that a lot of cities are not like-minded. We don't have the same goals and aspirations as other cities, and we get lumped in with them. And a lot of other cities that are saying local control is important don't have the same policies that we do. And when the state sees an issue, I think what we've seen with respect to housing over the years is that they come with the blunt instrument. And over the last 4 years, they've adopted more than 50 new bills, new laws that are affecting planning, housing, and zoning. And when I say we can't keep up, it sounds sort of cliche. We can't keep up with the state legislation, but we literally cannot keep up. And this year, the governor signed 31 new bills, and so we're scrambling. And I think that what we're, really most disappointed in, we recognize the need for affordable housing, Councilmember. We do. We think it's an important issue across the state. We think it's an important issue locally. But when we see bills like SB9 and even SB10 to some degree come forward, they don't achieve those goals. They're not going to result, in our opinion, in equity and inclusion at a meaningful scale. Rather, they're going to disrupt the neighborhoods. And I think that if the goal was to eliminate single-family housing and single-family zoning, then they've done that. I think the challenge for us will be to really ensure that we're forging ahead with laws and zoning rules and development regulations that are reflective of the character and the values that the Pasadena residents want and what the city council, wants to give us direction on. And I think Monday night was a perfect example where we were forging ahead with specific plan updates that would have resulted in densities much closer to the general plan maximums. I think what we landed on and we recognized was that the proposals by staff were not reflective of the state density bonus rules, which allow greater and more housing. And so I think that while we are going to be recommending some more density and intensity in some areas, we're certainly not going to be recommending it at the levels that the maximums under the general plan might otherwise allow. And so as we move forward, we A, are going to be tracking state laws, but B, are going to be looking to do and preserve everything that we can within the rules and within the state laws to protect and preserve the Pasadena single family neighborhoods. And when I say protect, I know we've talked about that before. It's really about ensuring that single family housing is also a choice, and choices are important. And while we do have more renters in the city, and we're continuing to build affordable housing and multifamily housing in our specific plans, it's okay that we still maintain our single family neighborhoods. And I think that's really what makes Pasadena Pasadena, is that balance between allowing growth of equity and inclusion and the policies that this council has enacted and continues to enact. And as we struggle with the state regulations that sometimes seek to undo that, I think there's frustration from the residents to the council and then down on to staff. And we do sometimes struggle to balance all of it.
Yeah, if I could, David, I think, a couple of points deserve to be reiterated. I think one is that local control has in many places in the state and the country been a euphemism for some very ugly things. We don't want those people here and the like. That is, I want to be clear, that is rejected by Pasadena. And I think by every single member of the city council and by my district, by our constituency. We want to be a diverse community in every way, ethnically and racially and economically. We want to be a city where school teachers and public safety officers and healthcare nurses and the like can live in the city where they work. It's complicated because there's so much foreign capital that impacts the cost of housing here, and the just outside demand, foreign, even from outside our region and the like. And I think it does go down very hard for many of us that the answer to that is simply forcing us to subdivide and then subdivide again, and essentially write out of existence, potentially single family neighborhoods, which we still think have an important role and place in a community like ours. So let's, did you want to screen share, David? I'm told you may have had, okay, good. And I know a couple of things we should probably just define the lexicon, because we'll be talking a little bit about SB9, which as I read SB9, it requires cities to allow single family lots to be subdivided at least once, and then maybe once again. I wonder if you could give us your interpretation of that. You may be on mute there, David, sorry.
I was, excuse me, council member. So, SB9 is exactly how you described it. It allows a property owner to subdivide their land, their property, their lot, and create two separate lots with a minimum lot size of 1,200 square feet, which is a very small lot. So if you think about this subdivision, what the state then says is that on each new parcel that gets created, you are allowed a minimum of 2 duplexes of 800 square feet each. And the challenge that we have is in conjunction with ADU law, and if we did nothing under SB9 and ADU
Just to be
law,
clear, alternative dwelling, additional dwelling unit.
Yeah. The accessory dwelling unit law that really has sort of, and I apologize for the.
No.
I'll do much better in speaking in plain English. This lot split that would allow 2 duplexes plus potentially up to 2 ADUs or accessory dwelling units on each lot could result in a total of 8 units where only one single family home existed. And so we are, as directed by the city council, we will be bringing a local ordinance forward to at least limit the 8 units down to 4. And then work on some other provisions that we are allowed to under the code to ensure that we can enact what are known as objective design standards, basically zoning rules and regulations. But council member, you're right. This SB9 bill is it's been some time in the making. The state of Oregon passed a similar law several years ago. Minnesota did it before that. And this idea, you might hear it be referred to as gentle infill or some other word, but the reality is that it does have the potential to disrupt an entire neighborhood, 1 or 2 of these on a block, and sort of disrupt the fabric of what a single family neighborhood might have looked like previously. We do have an exemption for areas that are designated landmark districts. So if you are in a designated landmark districts, we do not have to allow those subdivisions to occur. We can deny them. And so a property owner would not be able to take advantage of that. And so what we're concerned about is while we have many landmark districts, our entire city is not one. And there are areas within the city that maybe have some lower land values. And we see those as potentially being ripe for a developer to do the pro forma, do the math, and say that it might work for them. To do that lot split and potentially do that multiple times on a block or within a neighborhood. And so that's the concern with this SB9 bill.
I think, a couple of follow-ups there too. I mean, first of all, people have said to me, "Oh, Steve, it's not really going to happen and it's not really a threat." But it's kind of like manchinization. Just one property on a block or in a neighborhood could really be the beginning, sort of the camel's nose under the tent, then of completely changing the quality of life. And how do you grapple with things like parking and the need for infrastructure, water and power and transportation and police and fire, all of those things are impacted. And again, you can read those bills frontwards and backwards, and there's no resources and there's nothing that addresses any of that. It's just housing costs too much and we need more housing. So now we're going to make the cities accommodate it. And I want to make sure that people understand too, it's not just my words when I say we want to be a diverse and affordable community as well. If you look at the inclusionary zoning ordinance, which we were a pioneer in that regard. We have a strong and forceful inclusionary zoning. We have a great housing department and director, Bill Wong, and his deputy Jim Wong is here as part of our panel, where we just converted 500 or 600 units in the Westgate and the Hudson to moderate affordable units through a joint power authority. We've done other things. We acquired a Caltrans house on Waverly, and we have now affordable housing for 3 women that live there, that it's sort of transitional housing for them. And so we're constantly, hardly a week goes by at City Hall and the council and the committees that we're not looking at projects. Charles Loveman, who's a terrific developer of affordable housing through his nonprofit, Heritage Housing. We partner regularly with them. So we really walk the walk in Pasadena, and it's important that people realize that when they talk about these mandates from Sacramento. So, well, shall we open it up and include our other panelists now, David, and then maybe each of them could give us a thought or two, and then we could open it up for questions?
Absolutely, Councilmember.
Great. So in addition to David, we have Steve Mermel, who's already been introduced, our city manager, who's a big part of his portfolio has been housing and zoning and affordable housing. Jim Wong, whom I mentioned, is here. And Jim is the senior manager of the housing department, and really spearheads the city's efforts to actually build and require and acquire affordable housing. And be interested in hearing how SB9 may impact your department. And then Charles Loveman, the executive director of Heritage Housing Partners. Thank you, Charles, for being here. And from the nonprofit perspective and where you sit, how are these contours changing, in front of us? And I'd be derelict if I didn't also mention that we have the 710 properties now too. And my friend Dave Granis, who's really outstanding transportation professional and consultant for the city, is working on those pieces as well. We've got 140 homes that Caltrans owns that directly or indirectly will be able to be used as a resource for affordable housing. And then we've got this huge parcel that we're seeking what's called relinquishment, where we are having the state relinquish that property back to us. Remember, it was city property to begin with when the state came along 60 or 70 years ago and took it. And there were actually communities there. There were communities of color. There were African-American communities, Asian American communities, Latino communities there. We're going to have a great opportunity there, we hope, with relinquishment to reimagine that parcel as well. So David, thank you, David Granis, for being here. And I don't know if you want to add anything on any of that piece, or we'll wait for questions if they come up about the 710 as well. But
happy to wait for questions, Councilman.
Thank you, Dave. So why don't we start? Maybe Steve Mermel, did you have anything to add so far? And then I'll ask Jim Wong and Charles Loveman to chime in as well. And
Sure.
then we'll open it up.
Yeah, briefly, I want to take a step back to really sort of illustrate what I think is a bit of the insidiousness of SB9. Long ago, Pasadena as a community made a decision. There's recognition that all communities need to grow. You're either growing and thriving, or you're shrinking and dying. And I know there's a lot of people that would like to just say, no, let's freeze time, but you really can't. The city grows and develops, but how you grow and where you grow is an important community conversation. And long ago, the city's general plan, the concept was, we will preserve our single family neighborhoods. We will focus development along the main corridors of the city, near transit, near the commercial districts. And along comes something like SB9 that says, we're going to blow up single family residential zoning. We're going to allow all these lot splits. We already have the state pushing ADUs. I happen to live about 4 houses from someone who put an ADU in their backyard that's bigger than the front house. and there's now 8 cars parked there. It's very disruptive to a neighborhood, as David says. So Pasadena did a good job and said, we're going to focus our development in certain areas of the city by design to allow for growth. And then something like SB9 comes along and blows up that entire very well thought out community consensus. And so I think that's problematic. A couple other things I'd like to mention, as Councilmember mentions, we have a very aggressive inclusionary housing ordinance. The council recently moved the minimum requirements from 15% of units being affordable up to 20, or you have to pay a very, very hefty in lieu fee, which Jim Wong and Bill Wong then use to acquire things like that house on Waverly and turn it into a home for 3 women who were previously homeless. So we do good things with the money. We also appreciate when developers build the units. And in fact, right now, we have over 1,000 units ranging from workforce housing all the way down to extremely low income currently in the development pipeline. They're either in construction or they're under development. So that's a lot of units. And then separate from that, and Mr. Madison will be able to take credit because it's all in his district, has been this conversion to workforce housing of existing rental units, taking advantage of some favorable tax law, low interest rates. We've joined with a consortium that comes in and purchases property and essentially converts them, lowers the monthly rent over time as tenants move out and drops the rent. And on Monday night, I think it's Monday night, we have the final phase of the Westgate Project moving forward. And so that entire project will now be part of this workforce housing, and future tenants are going to see rent reductions than what they would otherwise see if they were paying market. So that's a good way to make sure that the people who work in our community, teachers and others, can stay in our community. So that's a big deal. I'll stop there because I know Jim Wong has a lot more details than I do, as does Charles Loveman.
Excellent points, Steve. And yeah, Jim, please go next. And I'm remembering now when you and I and others met out at the Westgate to tour the buildings, and we looked at the #1 property, which I think has more units of the 3. And so it's great that we're moving that into the program.
That's right. Thank you, Councilmember Madison, and thank you for this opportunity, and to your constituents for this opportunity for me to describe what the housing department, as part of this city organization, has been able to do in the last 30 or so years. Ever since the late 1980s, when the city's redevelopment agency went really full head on into doing affordable housing, the city, under numerous housing directors, and certainly with the support of the city council and of the community, has been able to develop over 4,300 deed restricted affordable units throughout the city. And these units that have been developed and built since the late 80s fall into a very healthy mix, income mix. Roughly 63% are very low income, and the balance, 37%, are low and moderate income. So these are affordable housing units that has made a difference in the lives of over 4,300 residents and households in Pasadena. Steve mentioned this very healthy and aggressive pipeline that we have of over 1,020 units. And that is due in no small part to the incredibly successful inclusionary ordinance that the council adopted 20 years ago in 2021. And that ordinance alone has resulted in nearly 600 affordable units developed in Pasadena. Those affordable units, again, represent a very healthy mix of rental and ownership, and also of the 3 restricted income categories: very low income, low and moderate. One of the things that I was reflecting upon is this past Tuesday's EdTech meeting. And that, to me, kind of represented the the gamut and breadth of what the housing department with the planning department has been able to do. In that council committee meeting, two actions were approved that I think exemplifies what we do best. One action was to approve a small 2-unit affordable home ownership project with Habitat for Humanity. And the second action that was also approved was, as Steve mentioned, a 500-unit missing middle project, the Westgate Phase 1, that was also approved, that will provide over 500 units of affordable housing for people in the low and moderate income bracket. So that to me was a very good illustration of the actions and programs and policies that this city has undertaken to provide affordable housing for its residents.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. And Charles, you care to chime in?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate this the chance to be on this panel very much. I'm going to talk quickly, sort of big picture about sort of what the state seems to be up to. And then I think I'm going to look at SB9 from the perspective of a real estate developer. So for me, this, the state really took over affordable housing in California in 2011, concurrent with the dissolution of redevelopment. And pretty much every funding program that exists, with a few exceptions, is administered out of Sacramento. So Sacramento's got a very clear focus of what they want to do, but it seems kind of schizophrenic. Like, for instance, the SB9, most of the housing programs in Sacramento are trying to drive people towards transit, sort of the vision that Steve articulated, of get people out of their cars, keep people close to transit, do more density, but then out of thin air, well, not out of thin air, because I think the state senator who has been promoting this idea has been at it for 3 or 4 years, but finally he got it across the finish line, is SB9, which seems to be just contrary to good planning and certainly the vision that Pasadena has, as well as what I think is kind of the vision that the state's been pursuing for most of their funding programs. The other thing that I note is how demographics, well, I'll say incomes of household incomes have changed in the 10 years since the state took over housing. So I have just been fascinated by some numbers with respect to the change in renter households in LA County and also in Pasadena over the last 10 years in terms of the incomes of those renter households. So in 2010 in LA County, there were, I get to get the right number here, around 170,000 renter households that earned over $150,000 a year. So I look at that as a home ownership developer and go, what are those households doing in in rental housing? They should be thinking about they're buying their first house. But today, 10 years later, there's 420,000 households in that category in LA County. So the number of households and I misspoke, it's 100,000 or higher renter households, but it's more than doubled. So while the state has been focused on rental housing and extremely low income and very low income rental housing, there's all these middle income folks who've been stuck in the rental inventory with no place to go. And that has been growing and growing and growing. The same phenomenon at much smaller numbers, obviously, but the same phenomenon has occurred in Pasadena, where the number of renter households who are making 100 grand a year or more, 150 grand a year or more, has more than doubled here in Pasadena. And I think that's one fact that I think probably drove the city to focus on that middle income, workforce income effort that they did with that Joint Powers Authority. So anyway, switching gears, thinking about SB9 and who would want to be developing units under the SB9 rules, I think it's really hard. David will correct me, but I don't know how you do that if you have an improved lot with a single family house sitting in the middle of the lot. So you're either going to tear down that house or you're going to look for vacant property. And so what I think is really going to happen with SB9 is the lower income neighborhoods, the less well-organized neighborhoods, it's gonna go to those neighborhoods first before it goes to a lot of the neighborhoods in West Pasadena. And so folks are gonna come in and, where a house is a really nice house, but it hasn't been well maintained, that's gonna be a candidate for demo so that they can squeeze in the number of units that David talked about, or just look for vacant land and come up with this density that just doesn't fit with the neighborhood character. So I think, like so many of these laws over the years, the neighborhoods that are going to bear the brunt of it are the lesser resource neighborhoods within our city. And
Thank you, Charles. And those statistics are so interesting, right? I'm sure there are many factors that play into that. I mean, I'm thinking about interest rates. I'm for purchase mortgages. I'm thinking about the no longer being able to deduct the mortgage expense on home ownership, which for decades was a way of tax policy being able to promote home ownership.
Right.
If the government's making half of your mortgage payment effectively through deductibility, it really empowers a lot more middle class Americans to enter home ownership. I'm sure part of it too is as affordability becomes more distant, then families with strong incomes are forced into those rental situations that you're describing too.
Exactly. So I use a rule of thumb of 5 times household income in terms of what you can afford, especially with low interest rates. So if you are a renter household making 150 grand household income, you can afford a $575,000, maybe a $600,000 house if you get a really good mortgage. But there aren't very many of those that are that are available out there. So the market sort of starts at 800 grand and up. And so there's just this big giant gap. Again, kudos to the city for addressing that with that workforce program that they did.
Mm-hmm.
And HHP, for our part, is paying a lot of attention to that workforce category for ownership as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's nowhere to go. You can't move to a first-time home ownership situation. So you either stay stuck in your apartment or you move to Nashville or Austin or Denver or wherever.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Well, I think that's a great sort of foundation for the discussion, and we've got a lot of great questions. I've got a bunch of them we've received ahead of time. I think if you want to ask a question real time, there's a button you can push. Yes, the Q&A button, is that it, or the? Okay, yeah. So I'll be curating those as I go too. But let me start with some of the questions that were teed up ahead of time. And some of these are from my friend Avram Gold. He's very active on these issues, very well informed. And I love Avram. He's got question number 1, part A. So there's a part A and a part B to this question, very well organized, but this is an excellent question. It's a good place to start. And the question is, SB9 also requires only one on-site parking place per unit. So apparently that's another overlay of SB9. And unless the residents are living within 1/2 mile of major transit, then no parking is required. So given our overnight parking restrictions for our neighborhoods, then, and really the entire city, if there are as many theoretically is 8 cars in one of these subdivided and then subdivided again, 2 duplexes per unit. 2 times 4 is 8 cars by 8 residents in 4 units even. Where do those cars park? So maybe David Reyes, we'll start with you, and if others have thoughts.
I think it's one of the major flaws with this bill. And I think that the state didn't care or didn't think to care about what that kind of impact would be on a neighborhood. And I think Steve described earlier his situation here in the San Fernando Valley, living next to I guess an ADU situation where there's now 8 cars. And I don't think that every city has the restrictions that we do, so you get a lot of cars on the street. And I think that's something that the city council will probably be grappling with is do we want to potentially in some areas of the city allow for overnight parking to actually occur versus 3 or 4 cars parked in the front yard, that the state would otherwise allow. So I think we're going to have some challenges with this. What we can require is 1 parking space per unit if it's outside of that half-mile radius. But within that half-mile radius, we can't require any parking. And I think that really is the challenge. We've been blessed to have the number of Gold Line, the 6 Gold Line stops that we have, because I think it's really, really important for mobility and for, as has been talked about, putting density near the transits. And this is a case where it now comes back to hurt us in a way that the state, I think, really didn't care about or consider. So I think it's something that we're going to grapple with, Councilmember.
I would just add, we do have some streets that are exempt from the overnight prohibition. Residents can petition for that. So there may be more of that. There will be requests for more exemption permits, et cetera. And I suppose in a worst case scenario, some legislator in Sacramento will come along and say parking is now a statewide concern and cities cannot regulate overnight parking.
Yeah, I think that's the risk, right? Because if you take Charles's example of a single family home in the middle of a lot, well, that's really not going to work very well. But even if it did, then where do all those parking spaces go? And I mean, there are some communities in LA County where people park on the lawn. You see cars parked on the lawn, and that there's some neighborhoods in our region where that's a commonplace thing. So. And then part B of that question, which I think we've kind of already foreshadowed, is will there be a requirement that we terminate our overnight parking restrictions? Certainly that's not part of SB9 presently, but could it be, follow-on legislation down the road if those same decision makers in Sacramento decide that cities are somehow avoiding the scope of SB9? And I guess we just have to wait and see on that.
I would just finally add, Councilmember, that it's an issue that we're starting to grapple with now with ADUs. It's a similar situation where the state has said we can't require parking for a conversion to an ADU. And we're left with a situation where we've heard from residents who are saying, give me an overnight parking permit because I've got nowhere to park. And we're kind of saying, well, you shouldn't have built the ADU because we have clear legislation that says if you build an ADU, that property is not eligible for overnight parking. And so as Steve Mermel said, maybe it's something that the state may come in and look at later, but they've not yet.
And it's so true. The city manager's point is an excellent one, is the unintended consequences of this. We're still building public transportation in this state and in this region. We're trying to extend the Gold Line out. I would still like to see the Gold Line extended west to the Burbank Airport, for example. But it won't take very long for local communities to realize, we don't really want transit stops in our city if that means then that it completely becomes the tail wagging the dog of local zoning and the development, the look and feel of our city. And that would be a shame because, all things being equal, with climate change being such a major issue for our generation, that we want to have more public transportation, more readily accessible, and get people out of their cars. So that's a perverse sort of externality of these legislations. And, I know the state senator from who authored this is from San Francisco, where they have tremendous homeless problems. I don't see these zoning mandates as being particularly helpful when it comes to the problem of, the chronic service resistant homeless that we are mostly concerned about, and that most of our resources, public safety resources and others, go to.
Yeah, Councilmember, I think you're absolutely right. And David and I talk about this. When we talk about housing, people always kind of lump in homelessness. But our experience with the people that become homeless, that's, as Bill Wong often says, that's the downstream result of a whole lot of things going wrong. And I think we're fooling ourselves if lot splits, ADUs, if we think that's going to solve homelessness. Those people need permanent supportive housing. They need intensive services. It is a totally different and a very intractable problem, but it's different than the people Charles Lubman was talking about, young couple, young professionals, young people who want to buy a home, start a family, that type of thing. They're two totally different problems.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with that. And, one question that was asked, and this is a good one as well, is, and I suppose I have to answer this one, what is the city's position on the ballot initiative that's circulating presently? I think being led by local electeds to supersede this sort of these 31 bills and all the others that are really preempting local control. And I know Mayor Gordo and I have both said publicly, we are listening very carefully to that, because you do reach a point where, again, for our city, we feel like, thanks, but no thanks in terms of Sacramento mandating how we address these objectives. We share the goals of affordability and the like. And so, we'll have to see. Now that sets up a really nasty confrontation, probably. Ballot initiatives are a very ham-handed way to make public policy. And I could imagine a lot of special interests on the development side of the table being prepared to fund an opposition to that initiative. And I'm not sure where the funding would come from for the pro campaign, so we'll have to see. I don't know if it's viable or not, but that is a really good question. Again, let me turn to some other questions here. There's this is a fair question, although I think it's a broad one. What creative ideas is Pasadena considering to restore local control? I suppose the ballot initiative might be a type of answer to that, but and I think, David, you've really focused on that in your answers and your work, that we're looking carefully at the ways that we can still have a strong impact on what ultimately can be built in our city.
Yeah, no, council member, one of the things that we did, I guess it was about a year and a half ago now, it feels like, was we were running up against a couple of affordable housing concession permit projects that were clearly out of scale and not consistent with what we had planned for in these particular areas. And we have no control over what the state density bonus laws say. And so what we did was we developed a local menu, which sort of guaranteed if they stayed on our menu, that allowed like a half of a story for 60% of the building, and like just a 0.5 FAR increase. So basically, just if you go a little bit smaller, you can go straight to the design commission, because time is money for developers. And we thought that was a nice incentive and a way to get folks off of that density bonus path and create bad projects. And it's worked. We've had quite a few projects go forward since we established that rule. The other thing that the council adopted was regulations that we put in place regarding micro units. This is another way to address missing middle. We actually, I'm happy to say, we permitted today a 200 unit project on Oakland, 100% micro units, probably going to be 100% affordable at the moderate level. We're working with them to understand what that will look like. But I just went downstairs to meet the developer this morning as we issued the building permit today, because we're very proud of that ordinance that otherwise somebody maybe have done a density bonus project to make it work. So there are things that we can do within limitations, but we can continue to be creative as we look at state legislation and see how it impacts what we're trying to do and see if we can offer a counter. So we're always doing something not to thwart or to stop, but to say, what can we do to make it work for the city of Pasadena? And I think the council's been very supportive of the ordinances that we've put forth, and I think they've been very effective.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Jim Wong, maybe you could say a word more about the Westgate project. And just for our neighbors here, it's those apartment buildings between Del Mar to the south, Dayton to the north, Pasadena Avenue on the west, and DeLacy to the east. And that's a total of what, 800 or 900 units probably, right?
It's a total of roughly 900 units. That development was built in 3 phases, completed in 2010, I believe. And that was built under the city's inclusionary ordinance, which required, among other things, that 96 units be covenanted as very low income. And that covenant, that city deed restriction, remains in place in perpetuity. So that very low income affordability will never go away. And so recently, within the past 2 months, and with hopefully with City Council support on Monday, Westgate Phases 1 will join Westgate Phases 2 and 3 to become part of this Joint Powers Authority Missing Middle project, in which all but 96 of these 900 units will, over time, over a period of 2 to 3 years, we think, will convert to basically moderate income missing middle workforce housing that we've been described between the past number of speakers, and that's in strictly in District 6 itself, and that's and I would like to add that District 6 represents over 20% of the city's affordable housing stock. Obviously, the Westgate is a big part of that. Yeah, so the Westgate Apartments is a big contributor to affordable housing in the city. Not only the 96 very low income rental units, but also the roughly 800 workforce missing middle project units. So a big win for the city.
Yeah, and I would count that as a creative way that we're addressing the underlying objectives that are supposedly driving things like SB9, the need for affordability and all. And not to get into an economics lesson, but basically the city forgoes in the short term property tax revenue that it would otherwise receive from the landlord, the owner. And the property is put into a joint powers authority. And then through that mechanism, the economics are such that the rents are able to be lowered substantially. I mean, I think we're talking about maybe 20-30% reduction in rents once they move into the program.
Yeah, the rent reductions are substantial, roughly $200 to $300 below market rent on average.
Mm-hmm. And for some of the larger units, it's even more, I know, because we toured some of the 2, and there may even be 3-bedroom units there. So I certainly think that's a creative way that we've addressed this. And so thank you for that question. There was a question, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Councilmember, that, and we're going to continue with that approach as we look to implement a local ordinance for SB9. We don't know all the details yet, but we're going to continue along the sort of what works for Pasadena, what can we do within the state law to make the ordinance work for the city, if that makes sense.
So we had a couple of really good questions about the California Comeback Plan, and this was the initiative that Governor Newsom announced that invests some $22 billion in housing and homelessness. 84,000 new affordable homes for Californians, 44,000 new housing units, treatment beds for people that are homeless. And do we know yet what our share or our role or participation in that will be? I guess I'd look to to
We
Steve.
don't have details yet. It sounds like we'll get in the hundreds of thousands of dollars money towards homelessness, but we don't have any other details beyond that.
Mhm. So we'll want to follow that carefully, obviously, in ledge policy and at the council at large as well. There's a good question or two about water. You know, water is something that many of us don't think about. We just turn on the spigot and assume it'll be there, but there are a number of highly informed questions here about, you know, what will the impact here be on our 2020 water system and resources plan in terms of the replacement of distribution pipelines and aging infrastructure. You know, will or can the expansion of units under SB9 require the developer to pay for some of these infrastructure improvements that are required or upgrades? Are we considering that? And I know no one from Water and Power is here this evening, but.
No, I can handle that. We do make developers pay to upgrade our infrastructure, our hard infrastructure, sewer systems, water. Ask poor Charles Loveman how much he's paid to the city for his many projects. So we do make them upgrade their service to run more pipe, etc. As it relates to water, what we're hearing a lot of people say is, with the water crisis that it is, shouldn't we stop all development because there's not enough water to serve everybody? And my answer is going to be a little contradictory, but when you understand the landscape of it all, no pun, maybe you'll understand better. The water is a crisis throughout the entire Southwest United States. Pasadena is one relatively small, but punches way above its weight community in a very, very big area. Our demand for water has actually been dropping. If you go back to the year 2005, demand was about 37,000 acre feet per year. By 2020, our demand is now about 27,000 acre feet per year, as people have got the message and they've pulled out their lawns and they've taken the parkway and converted it. And frankly, all the new development tends to be multi-unit housing, which is terribly efficient, and it doesn't have a lot of irrigable area. So we see our demand going down, per capita usage is going down. We project that by the year 2045, even with the build out of our general plan, that our demand will be 14% less than it is today. So we get 60% of our water from the Metropolitan Water District. We get 40% from local groundwater sources, and our demand is lower than our total available supply. So for the foreseeable future, we're okay, but just like with global warming, we're all in a closed system. So to the extent that drought persists and the Southwest United States doesn't get rain, it's going to be a problem. But our pattern of development in Pasadena is superior to keep pushing development further and further out east, where they build these big ugly boxes 10 feet from one another and everyone has a lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would just add, Councilmember, that with respect to SB9 and any project that's proposed under SB9, they would be paying for infrastructure, new water hookups, as well as our $26,000 residential impact fee for each unit. So absolutely, they will be required and responsible for that kind of infrastructure if an SB9 project comes forward.
Mm-hmm. Good to know, for sure. And, you know, Steve, you mentioned in passing the setbacks. I wanted to ask all of you, David or Charles, you know, these setback requirements of SB9, did I read correctly, only 4 feet? We're only allowed to have a setback requirement of 4 feet. So that means that it's possible that you could have only an 8-foot crawl space in between housing units.
So you'll need a narrow car to park there.
4 feet on the rear, 4 feet on the side is the most that we can ask for. Yeah. And so that creates not only air, light issues, but also potentially privacy issues. So we're exploring, you know, every sort of regulation that we can think of to address some of this, including in some cases where we don't want 2 stories, maybe it makes sense to put the 2 stories and it's right in the middle of the property for the second story, so that it's away from the setbacks, excuse me, away from the side property lines. Yes, you heard correctly. It's 4 feet from the sides, 4 feet from the rear. And that's the most that we can ask for. Certainly a developer can propose more. And if we ask for additional requirements for open space, maybe we can figure out a way to incentivize them if they want to do it to push further away from those property lines.
I don't know how you can be a city of gardens with 4-foot setbacks, you know? So that's deeply troubling as well. And it sort of shows you how, you know, once you set out on a certain path, then you end up making all of these sort of compromises along the way that really make you wonder.
Steve, I don't know how you could physically fit the development yield, the number of units that you're allowed, especially if you're that minimum size that David quoted with 1,200 square foot lot.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the 4-foot setback, I don't know how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just not enough land area. So you go up, I don't know what it means.
Yeah. We have a question here just coming in real time about, you know, is landmark district the only way to really protect a neighborhood? And then, of course, there's the other end of the pendulum, which is some residents feel that landmark districts unfairly, you know, impede or restrict homeowners from making changes to the front of their home, for example. So what's our take on landmark districts?
Right. Thankfully, this is one area where I think the bill's author listened to some local jurisdictions. And if you're a designated landmark district today, or future designated landmark districts, and we have quite a few in the city, you again are exempt from the SB9 rules, and we could prohibit any lot splits in those areas. I would say that with respect to preservation and how important our landmark districts are, there is a bit of a development. There's a process that someone would have to go through in order to make changes to the front of their house, and in some extreme circumstances, we would be working with the homeowner to maybe alter what they wanted to do to ensure that it did conform to the landmark district for this certificate of appropriateness. So it's true that if you're a landmark district, when you make changes to your home, there's a process to go through. But in my 10 years here, we've never not allowed those changes to happen. So property owners can make changes, they do make changes. And we want to work with homeowners to ensure that anybody in a landmark district can go through the changes that they want to go through to improve their home.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question for Charles. You know, are there benefits, and I think you touched on this in your analysis of the economics, for example, of home ownership, but are there benefits for a community to promoting affordable ownership as opposed to just affordable rental housing?
Thanks, Steve. Well, obviously, I think yes. So I think there's two impacts. So let me just say a little bit about the city's local preference ordinance. So the city, when we are selling affordable units, when somebody else is renting affordable units, there's a preference for households who either live or work or live and work in Pasadena. So our long-term experience doing this for 20 years is about 85% of the units that we sell go to households that have some affiliation, either already living in Pasadena or renting in Pasadena. And so somebody had asked me, you know, well, who are your buyers? So our buyers are everybody's neighbors here for the most part, or you know, people when you go into the grocery store or whatever. So they're folks that you see. The other benefit, and ours is a first-time homebuyer program, so the other benefit of moving someone from a rental unit into a newly built or newly rehabbed homeownership unit is that you're leaving a vacant unit behind And so that's what some other folks who are looking big picture at the housing problem and the upstream problem that one of the panelists talked about was if we get those middle income people out of rental and into first time home ownership, you start to create vacancies and turnovers within the rental inventory, and you take the pressure off the folks who are at the bottom of that rental inventory. But whether or not there's a correlation between turning people into first-time owners or not, it's great for people who are owners because they start to earn equity. They pay the same amount in a mortgage that they would pay in rent if they were an affordable rental program, but they're earning equity.
Yeah, and I like your point about freeing up. It's sort of a Keynesian economics theory. That one purchase actually multiplies and creates opportunity right down the line. And I mean, one of the things we're proudest about in my office is the 9 Habitat for Humanity homes down at Desideria. Those are a great example of that. And then you have a lot of school-age kids who are now enrolled in our public schools. Our public schools need kids. That's how they get their money from their census. Their student body. And so this all sort of feeds on itself in a very, very positive way, I think. Will there be any prohibition under SB9 or here locally on short-term rentals or, party houses or any of the sort of parade of horribles that one thinks about? Again, once there's this mandate that says essentially to developers, it's your time to eat, come and subdivide in Pasadena.
Yeah, Councilmember, when the state enacted the new ADU regulations, one of the things that we did was say that no one can build a new ADU that would be used for short-term rental. And I suspect that we would be doing the same thing for any SB9 lot, and we'd be allowed to do that.
Excellent. I think that would be welcomed by West Pasadena, certainly. And I would hope by the entire city. So, well, I think we've covered most of the questions. I know we have just a couple of minutes left. I don't know if each of you wants to sum up, or maybe I could ask David Granis one question, because we did get some questions about sort of opportunities with the Caltrans homes. I should say it's a very fast-moving dynamic with Caltrans. It's after a long period of quietus. Now we're really into it with Caltrans. Today they issued regulations about the homes that they own, and we're studying those. They're a bit arcane and dense in my estimation, but we're certainly looking at that. Some of the other cities have gone in a different direction in that, and are putting together initiatives where the city would buy all the property and then be responsible for taking it from there. But I know, David, you're working principally on the relinquishment of the ditch, as we affectionately call the former 710 connector route. And what do we need to know about that that would be helpful in this discussion about affordability and the kind of city that we want to live in?
I think thematically, Councilman, the theme of tonight has been kind of local control and how is that being dealt with and addressed with state mandates, et cetera. In the case of the 710, and specifically, we're focused on the transportation portion, really just a bit north of California, all the way up to Walnut. So that area between St. John and Pasadena Avenue that currently has kind of freeway to freeway infrastructure that is never going to get really connected to an extended 710. That has been kind of adjudicated and dealt with by both Metro and by Caltrans now. And so, the thing to know is that Caltrans, to their credit, has been really for the first time in 50 years, has been really a good partner in looking at, they don't really see the utility of them owning this into the future. And because it's not going to be what it was intended to be when they took displaced 4,000 Pasadena residents back in between 1965 and 1974 is when all this happened. And so the idea is that was, as you mentioned correctly, that was a neighborhood. And it had a very diverse population, and actually it was multifamily housing and all income levels, all ethnicities, et cetera. And so the idea here is that Caltrans, because once they determine that they aren't going to need it as a freeway to freeway, it still has transportation utility. We still have streets that were taken out that need to probably be put back at some point, to connect west and east of the ditch, as we call it affectionately. We'll find a better name for it, Councilman, I promise. But in any event, this area, it's about, give or take, about 60 acres, and a lot of it is, needs to be infrastructure in terms of those street connections. But really, the idea of reconnecting and restoring a neighborhood that once was there. The local control theme that I want to speak to is, we're not determining any land use whatsoever for this. This is really just the opportunity to move from a Caltrans ownership of what's there now to a City of Pasadena ownership of what's there now. And then it would be up to David Reyes and his good work and his team to really, and the city team overall, to really look at kind of a bottom-up community-based planning process that determines what really should be there. But that can't really occur. We can't, as Pasadena, we can't plan for something we don't control and own. So the first step is really to get control of the property. And we've had some really good cooperation from Caltrans District 7, from Tony Tavares, and from the California Transportation Commission. And so we're marching forward. We've done all the analytics that they've asked for, and we're marching forward and hope to, in early 2022, have a decision by the California Transportation Commission that really enables Pasadena then to launch into a planning process. So it's really about local control, very much like the theme of this evening that you've hosted. So thank you.
Yeah, it is very emblematic when you think about it, about, obviously what decisions should ultimately be made, extremely important, but first, who gets to make those decisions? Will they be made in Sacramento by, legislative or executive fiat, or will they be properly delegated back to the community where the land was seized originally? And there are important institutions in that corridor too. I'm a big fan of Sequoia School, which is perched right there at the end of that on the south. And so I'm optimistic that we can make the case and be able to repatriate that land and then make really wise, decisions about planning and the future there, using the Pasadena way. And I don't mind the ditch. I think any of us that were freeway fighters, don't mind a little pejorative when it comes to the property there. I know Mayor Bogard and Claire Bogard shared with me that years ago when it was not even less well attended to than it is now, which isn't saying much, and it would fill up with water on the rainy seasons. There was a transportation director, I may botch the name, but I want to say it was Mary Gianturco, and they dubbed it Lake Gianturco. I think she was the head of Caltrans at that time, the state transportation. Do I have that right?
That's correct. Gianturco was back in the first Jerry Brown administration.
The 70s, right? Yeah. Well, I want to close then just a couple minutes early with kind of where I started, with a lot of gratitude to Steve Mermel for great service for 33 years to the city, and standing ovation figuratively, if not literally. And Commander Chute, you'll have to represent the chief on this one. The same thing for Chief Perez. And to my great friends and colleagues, Charles Loveman, Jim Wong, David Granis, David Reyes, thank you so much for being part of this. I feel better just talking to you guys, because I know whatever we're doing here in Pasadena, it's going to be best of class, as cities go. And I want to give a big thank you to KPAS as always. And for their services here. I've got Jade Chang from the City IT Department, Pasadena Media, Bobby Ferguson and Danny Hess, and to all of our great city staff that help, and my great field rep, Takako Suzuki, without who, none of this would be possible. So Thank you all. Stay safe. I hope at our next town hall we can actually be present in person. Yeah. So yeah, and if you're recording the game, I won't tell you the score, but if you're a Dodger fan, hurry up and turn it on. Okay. All right. Thank you all.